I worked my whole life so my son wouldn't have to struggle the way I did. That's what I told myself every morning for 32 years when I drove that same stretch of I-95 to the office before the sun was fully up. I told myself that when I skipped vacations, when I missed school plays, when I sat in parking lots on the phone instead of being at the dinner table, every sacrifice had a name on it, and that name was my son. His name is Kevin. He's 34 years old. And 3 months ago, he sent me a letter, an actual printed letter, sealed in a white envelope, telling me I was not welcome at his wedding. Inside that same envelope was an invoice. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I'm not a man who cries easily. I'm 63 years old. I grew up in a house where my father thought showing emotion was a sign of weakness, and some of that got into me whether I wanted it or not. But when I sat at my kitchen table that Tuesday morning in February and read that letter and then unfolded that invoice, I felt something move through my chest that I hadn't felt since the day I buried my own father. Something between grief and disbelief, like the floor had just quietly dropped out from under everything. The invoice was for $280,000, itemized, with a due date. Let me back up, because you need to know who Kevin is and who I was as a father before any of this makes sense. I built a regional logistics company from nothing, started it in my garage in 1998 with a used truck and a business license and a home equity loan that kept me up every night for 2 years straight. By the time Kevin was in high school, we were comfortable. By the time he graduated college, a college I paid for in full, not a dollar of debt, we were doing well. I gave Kevin a good life. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm proud of it. That's what a father is supposed to do. What I'm less proud of is that I didn't always know where the line was between giving and enabling. My late wife Sandra understood it better than I did. She had a way of holding Kevin accountable that I never quite managed after she passed. He was 19 when we lost her. I was so consumed by my own grief and by guilt, the guilt of a man who worked too much, that I overcompensated. I said yes when I should have said no. I wrote checks when I should have let him figure things out on his own. I'm not making excuses for Kevin. I'm just telling you the truth about myself, because some of the people in the comments of videos like this one always want to ask, what did you do to deserve this? And I think about that question a lot. I don't have a clean answer. What I can tell you is that after Sandra died, Kevin changed, gradually at first, then all at once. He became someone who expected things, who didn't ask, he informed, who treated my generosity as a given, as something owed, as a line item in a budget that was simply always going to be there. I noticed it more when he started dating Adrian. He brought her home for Thanksgiving 2 years ago. She was perfectly pleasant at the table, pretty, polished, the kind of woman who knows exactly what impression she's making in every room she walks into. She called me Mr. Whitfield all weekend, even after I asked her to call me by my first name. I told myself that was just formality, just nerves. I was trying to be fair. But I watched small things. The way she looked at my house, not with warmth, with assessment. The way she spoke about her own family, her upbringing in Connecticut, her parents' second home on the Cape, in a tone that made it clear she viewed those things as a floor, not a ceiling. The way she redirected conversations about Kevin's career into conversations about Kevin's potential, by which she seemed to mean potential earnings. Kevin had proposed by Christmas. I was happy for him. I genuinely was. I wanted my son to have what I had with Sandra. I told him that. I took him to dinner at the steakhouse where I used to take him when he got good grades, back when he was 14 and the world still felt simple, and I told him I was proud of him and I hoped he'd found something real. He seemed pleased. Then he told me what he and Adrian were thinking for the wedding. The venue was a restored estate property in the Hudson Valley. the kind of place that gets featured in magazine spreads. He mentioned a figure, casually like he was telling me the weather, of around 200,000 just for the venue and catering. There was going to be a destination rehearsal dinner in Charleston. A florist Adrian had been following on social media for 2 years. A custom dress from a bridal designer whose waiting list was reportedly 18 months long. I sat with that for a moment. "That's a significant amount of money, Kevin," I said. "I know," he said, "but this is important to Adrian. And to me. Have you thought about a budget? About what you two can contribute?" He smiled. And this is the smile I've been thinking about ever since, the one I should have read more carefully, and said, "Dad, you've been saying for years that you'd do anything for me. This is what I'm asking for." I didn't say yes that night. I told him I'd think about it. I told him we'd talk more. That was my first mistake, not saying no clearly and immediately. Over the next few weeks, the calls came more frequently. Kevin called. Adrian called. At one point, Adrian's mother called me, a woman I had met exactly once, to tell me that this was a very important day for both families and that she hoped I understood the significance of the occasion. I thanked her and got off the phone as quickly as I could. I started asking questions. About Adrian, specifically. About who she was outside of what she presented. A man I used to do business with in Hartford mentioned, without me prompting him, that he recognized Adrian's last name. Said he'd had a professional interaction with her a few years back that didn't end well. He didn't give me details, but he told me to be careful. So I did some looking. What I found was not what I expected to find, and not nothing. There was a civil suit from 2021. A former employer claiming she had misrepresented her credentials on a senior position application and then falsified reporting numbers during her time there. The case was settled, which means no public finding of guilt, but the settlement amount was not small and the terms included a non-disparagement clause. I found this through a court record search, which is public information. I also found that she had declared bankruptcy in 2019. She was 26 at the time. The stated liabilities were significant, and among them was a personal loan from a family member that had apparently gone unrepaid. I found that her social media presence, which was substantial, tens of thousands of followers across platforms, had markers consistent with purchased engagement. Variable follower-to-like ratios, spikes in follower counts on dates that corresponded with nothing public, comment patterns from accounts with no other activity. I'm not a private investigator. I'm a 63-year-old man who spent 3 decades in logistics and learned to do due diligence before entering into agreements. What I found didn't make Adrian a bad person. It made her a person with a history she hadn't disclosed. And it made me want to understand more about what exactly was being asked of me. I sat Kevin down, not accusatory, not with a file folder in my hands like some courtroom drama, just father and son at the kitchen table, the same table where he used to do his homework, and I told him what I'd found and asked him if he knew. He knew about the bankruptcy. He claimed not to know about the lawsuit. He seemed, genuinely, surprised about the follower situation, and then defensive, and then angry. Not at her. At me. "You investigated my fiancé," he said. "I looked into someone who's going to be part of our family," I said. "That's the same thing. Kevin, I'm not attacking her. I'm asking you if you knew these things. It doesn't matter. People have pasts. You're not perfect either. I never said I was. I'm just asking you to talk to me." He left. That was in March. April was mostly silence. A few texts from Kevin that were cold and short. Nothing from Adrian. Then in late April, the envelope arrived. I looked at it for a long time before I opened it. The letter was brief, typed, not handwritten. It informed me that after careful consideration, Kevin and Adrian had decided that given my behavior, by which they meant my asking questions, apparently, they did not feel comfortable having me present at their wedding. They wished me no ill will. They hoped I would respect their decision. The invoice was attached. $280,000. It covered the venue deposit, the catering contract, the florist retainer, the photographer, the videographer, the rehearsal dinner, and a 2-week honeymoon in Italy and Greece that I had never agreed to fund. At the bottom, where a normal invoice would have terms and conditions, Kevin had written, by hand, the only handwritten thing in the entire package: "You always said you'd do anything for me. Prove it." I put the papers down, I got up, and I poured myself a glass of water. I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard, where there's still a basketball hoop I put up when Kevin was 8. The pole tilted about 5 degrees because I set the concrete wrong and never fixed it. I looked at that hoop for a long time, then I called my attorney. Her name is Barbara, and she has handled my business affairs for 19 years. I have a great deal of trust in her and very little ability to shock her at this point. I read her the invoice over the phone. There was a pause. "Walter," she said. "And I should say here, my name is Walter Whitfield, and I have never appeared in one of these videos before, and God willing this will be the last time I have to... Are you asking me if this is legally enforceable?" "Among other things," I said. "It's not," she said. "It's not," she said. "A unilaterally drafted invoice for services and events you did not agree to in writing is not a binding obligation. He cannot sue you for this and win." "I didn't think so," I said. "But I want to understand all my options." Barbara asked me what I wanted the outcome to be. That's always her first question. I thought about it honestly. I didn't want to hurt Kevin. I didn't want some kind of war. What I wanted, what some part of me still wanted, even then, was for my son to call me and say he'd lost his mind and he was sorry, and could we please figure this out together. I waited for that call for 2 weeks. It did not come. What came instead was a voicemail from Adrian. She did not identify herself at first. She spoke calmly, almost pleasantly, the way someone speaks when they've rehearsed. She said she understood I might have concerns, but that she hoped I would realize this was Kevin's day as much as hers, and that a father who truly loved his son would want to give him everything he'd asked for. And that if I had any hesitation about the amount, I should think about what Kevin had given up over the years by having a father who was always working, and wasn't this a chance to make that right? I'm going to be honest with you. That message hit me, not because it was true, but because it was precisely targeted. Whoever coached her on that message, or whether she came to it herself, knew exactly where to push. I called Kevin. He answered, which surprised me. "Did you hear Adrian's message?" he asked, before I could say anything. "I did," I said. "And I want to ask you something, Kevin. Honestly, do you love her? Not her lifestyle, not what you two look like together, not the wedding, not the plan. Do you love her?" Silence. "That's a strange thing to ask," he finally said. "Maybe," I said, "but you didn't answer." "Of course I love her." "Then do this differently," I said. "Have a smaller wedding. Have a wedding you two can actually afford. I will be there. I will celebrate with you. I will give you a meaningful gift. But I'm not paying $280,000 to attend an event I've been uninvited from. And I need you to hear me clearly. If you send me an invoice again, I will treat it the way I'd treat any other business communication and respond through cancel." He hung up. I didn't hear from him for 6 weeks. The wedding was in July. I knew the date. It went by like any other Saturday, except that I went to the cemetery in the morning and sat with Sandra for a while. I told her what had happened. I don't know if that sounds strange to you. It's what I do. Then I did something I'd been putting off for reasons that no longer seemed compelling. I had been intending, for the past year or so, to restructure my estate. I had delayed it partly out of superstition, partly because estate planning forces you to confront mortality in ways that are uncomfortable even when you're not 63. I called Barbara and I told her I was ready. We spent 4 weeks working through it. The company, the property I own outside of my primary residence, the accounts, the investments. I have a younger sister, Claudia, who is thoughtful and sensible, and who has 3 kids who are, to put it plainly, nothing like Kevin. I have long-time employees who have given me decades of good work. I have a mentorship program at a local community college that I've been funding informally for years. There are causes I believe in. I am not going to tell you the dollar amounts. That's private. What I will tell you is that Kevin's position in my estate changed substantially. Not to nothing. He is still my son, and I am not interested in cruelty. But from the primary and nearly sole beneficiary to one consideration among several, that felt correct to me. It felt honest. It felt like something Sandra would have approved of. In September, Kevin called. Adrian was not on the line. It was just Kevin, and he sounded tired. He asked if we could meet. I said yes. We met at a diner near where he grew up. I got there first and ordered coffee and sat in the same booth we used to sit in on Saturday mornings when he was in elementary school. He came in looking like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. He slid in across from me and picked up the menu, even though I'm certain he wasn't hungry. I owe you an apology, he said. I waited. The letter was wrong. The invoice was wrong. I know that. Adrian and I talked about it, and I should have talked to you differently. I noticed the construction of that sentence. Adrian and I talked about it. Not, I realized. Not, I'm sorry I hurt you. Kevin, I said, I don't need a speech. I need to understand something. When you wrote on that invoice, prove it. Did you believe that? Did you genuinely believe that paying $280,000 for a wedding I wasn't invited to was proof of my love for you? He looked at the table. I think I wanted to believe you owed me something, he said, for all the times you weren't there, for losing Mum and then it being just the two of us and you being at the office. That one landed. I know I wasn't there the way you needed me to be, I said. I've thought about that for a long time, but owing you something and owing you everything are different things. And the way you try to collect it, through an invoice, through exclusion, that's not something I can just fold up and put away. What does that mean for us? He asked. It means we're going to have to build something new, I said. Slowly, on honest terms. It means I'm going to need to see who you are when Adrian isn't in the room. Not because I hate her, but because I need to know my son is still in there. He didn't have a response for that. We sat for a while. We ordered food neither of us really ate. When we got up to leave, he hugged me in the parking lot in that stiff, uncertain way, that 2 people hug when they don't quite know yet what they are to each other. I drove home and sat in the kitchen for a while. I don't know how this ends. I want to be honest about that. I am not going to tell you that I've arrived at some peaceful resolution or that my son and I are closer than ever and everything worked out. I'm 63 years old and I've lived long enough to know that some things take years and some things don't fully heal, and the honest version of most stories doesn't end with a bow on it. What I can tell you is what I know. I know that I spent 32 years working to give my son a life, and some of what I gave him was good, and some of it was a disservice. I know that an invoice in an envelope is not a relationship. I know that love is not a ledger, and no matter how many times someone implies that you owe them, you are not obligated to accept the terms of a debt you never agreed to. I know that Sandra would have handled this better than I did. She always did. I know that the basketball hoop in the backyard is still tilted 5 degrees, and I'm still not going to fix it, because some things you just leave as a reminder. If you're watching this and you have children, grown children who have started to look at you the way Kevin looked at my house that first Thanksgiving, like an appraisal rather than a homecoming, please don't wait as long as I did to say clearly what you will and will not accept, not in anger, not as punishment, just clearly as one adult to another. And if you're watching this and you are the Kevin in the story, if somewhere in you there is a voice that knows the invoice was wrong before you ever sealed the envelope, it's not too late to put down the ledger and just call your father. That's all I have. I've been sitting with this story for a while now, turning it over the way you turn a stone in your hand, looking at every side of it. What happened between Kevin and me didn't come from nowhere. That's the part that's hardest to say out loud, but it's the truest part. I made choices for 32 years. Good choices in some ways, costly ones in others. And those choices shaped a son who learned that love and money were the same currency. I didn't teach him that on purpose, but I taught it to him. Every time I wrote a check instead of showing up, every time I said yes because saying no felt like failing him, the actions I took, repeated over years, produced a result. That's not fate, that's just cause and effect, plain and honest. I think about Adrian too. Not with bitterness anymore, mostly with a kind of tired clarity. She walked into a situation that I had already built, a father with resources and guilt in roughly equal measure, and a son who had learned to treat both as available. I'm not excusing what she did. The voicemail she left me was calculated in a way that still bothers me when I think about it too long. But she didn't create Kevin's sense of entitlement. She just recognized it and moved toward it. People tend to move toward what they think will hold their weight. That's human. The question is what you built and whether it was solid. What I did after that envelope arrived, the attorney calls, the estate restructuring, the slow and deliberate drawing of lines, that wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't punishment either, not really. It was, for the first time in a long time, me being honest about what I actually valued and what I was actually willing to accept. That's a harder thing to arrive at than it sounds. When you spent decades being the provider, the fixer, the one who makes problems go away with a signature, learning to say, this is the limit, feels almost like a foreign language. You have to practice it. I practiced it late. But I practiced it at the meeting at the diner with Kevin, sitting across from him in that booth where he used to eat pancakes as a kid. I didn't walk away from that feeling triumphant. I walked away feeling something more like grief, with a little air let into it. He's still my son. That doesn't turn off. What I've learned is that loving your child and being clear-eyed about who they've become are not opposing forces. You can hold both. The trick is not letting the love become a blindfold. If there's anything I'd want someone to take from what I've been through, it's this. The most important thing you can give the people you love is not money. And it's not even time, though time matters more than I gave it. It's the willingness to be honest with them even when honesty costs you something. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when they leave the table angry. Kevin needed someone to tell him no earlier, with warmth and without apology. That was my job. I didn't do it well enough, and we've both been paying for it. I'm 63. I still have time to do things differently. So does he. That's the only thing I'm holding on to right now, and most days it's enough.